Welcome, everyone, to Impactus Podcast, where we will equip you for a life of purpose and godly impact. This is episode 12, and I have the privilege today to be here with Pastor Kirk Giles.
Pastor. Sounds so weird.
Well, that's why I said it. I'm so glad, Kirk, to be here with you and talking about such a special topic that I know that it is in your heart. So we are here right in the beginning of the month of February, and this is like Valentine's time. A lot of guys should be thinking about their wives, and so there's no better topic than for us to discuss this, right? Like what it is to be a godly husband. And I know, that based on your 24 plus years in ministry, a lot of them in men's ministry and over 25 years being married. So all of that to say that you're just an old guy.
I was waiting for that. It's funny because in a staff meeting the other day, I talked about a phone book as an illustration, and my youth pastor looked at me and said, "What is a phone book?"
Oh my goodness. That is hilarious. Do they know what it is, a public payphone? Like,
I'm not sure. But you know what? Yeah, I'm okay with being called old because that means I'm wise too. So
let's go with that.
We'll go with that.
Yeah.
That helps my ego a little bit more.
Well, and I think it gives legibility to the podcast today. So let's go with that. Well, Kirk, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining us and being with us here today, discussing on this. Let me ask you something. Like, based on your life experience and ministry experience and all that, so what are, like, for you, the three most common issues that are hindering men today from being and becoming a godly husband?
Oh man, I think there's all kinds of issues and challenges in being a godly husband. I'm just going to start off by saying, like, I think that we're living in a really stressful time for marriages. I think that just the stresses of the realities that we're living in right now compounds marriage problems right now, and it causes a lot of divisions, a lot of problems in a lot of marriages. And I find that for men, we used to be able to compartmentalize our lives. We used to be able to say, like, I've got my work and I've got my time with my kids and I've got my family, my wife and church. And so we kind of had these boxes that we lived in. But the more that we have a space where we have to work from home,
yes,
or where you're on lockdowns and you can't go out to eat or you can't do whatever it is that you used to do, the more that all those things are blending together, and it makes it really challenging for guys who are used to compartmentalizing everything to coexist where all these things are blending together into one. And so it is a challenge to keep your marriage in a good place right now. I think that in terms of some of the challenges in being a godly husband in general, right now, but always, men have a really hard time understanding their wife and her needs, because we're just wired differently and we think differently and we approach life differently. And so actually learning to become understanding as men, learning that kind of emotional connection to appreciate somebody else's perspective on life and how to approach situations, I think that's always a challenge for us. It gets kind of multiplied in this moment, but it's always a challenge that's there. I'm going to share 4 issues. That's the first one. I know you asked for 3, but I think there's 4 that I really are kind of overarching issues with guys.
Yeah.
I think things like porn and sex have been really challenges for men in being a godly husband, because it just so there's been a dramatic increase in the use of porn since COVID started, and that creates all kinds of challenges for men in terms of how they relate to their wife, because you end up wanting your wife to be like what you experienced, what you saw in the porn, and it's an unfair comparison to make. It's an unfair thing to put on your wife.
For that matter.
That's right. And not to mention the sin issues of lusting after another woman and everything else, and what it does to your brain and how that impacts your own view of sex. Just there's a long list of issues with it. I think that men, the other thing I'll say is men tend to have kind of what I would call a secret life. That is isolated from their wife. And whether that's your job, whether that's money and how you're spending money, whether that's how you're spending your time, there's a certain element of being anonymous and independent that men still like to have. And there is this sense where we create kind of a secret life separate from our wife, but that creates all kinds of problems. Because it's hard to be one with somebody that you're holding secrets from. And so you can never live out the fullness of marriage if you are if you're holding secrets away from somebody. There's multiple layers of challenges in that environment. And then there's another one that I think most of us don't even think about, because it's actually a good issue in our life, but I think it creates a problem in our marriages, and it's our kids. I think one of the challenges men have in being a godly husband is that they actually have raised kids to a higher level of priority in the family than what the kids should be. And so what that ends up creating for a guy in terms of trying to be a godly husband is there's almost this sense of competition for your affection and your attention and everything else. The competition between your affection and attention towards your wife versus your attention towards your kids. And, the good news is statistically, men are more invested in the lives of their kids than they have been in previous generations. So that's great news, dads. We're stepping up. We're living into the moment. But you have to think through about what are the implications on this in terms of drawing closer to your wife and being one with her.
Yeah, I really appreciate your response, Kirk, because as you were talking, I was thinking about how those three issues, they are actually very intertwined. Because if you think really about it, like if you are a man who is living this independent secret life kind of a thing, that in this your own world sort of a thing, no wonder you're not going to be able to really understand your wife, because you are not being transparent yourself. You're not being vulnerable yourself. You're not being emotionally engaged yourself. But you still need, because you still are, a human being. So, and then the kids kind of become the place that you go to get those things, right? Yep. So it kind of just creates this cycle that are compounded, right? So I think that's a great observation, which is very interesting, because like right now, like I really understand that, that culture has changed. That you and I are kind of, old people, you know what I mean? In some ways, right? Like I can think of right now as myself being a 20-year-old right now, getting married right now, right? I know you have two boys who got married last year, right? Last year?
2019.
2019. Wow. Yeah. So it's over more than a year now.
That's right. They're now old married men.
They are old married men now. Yeah. So I guess you left a good legacy that way. So I think about it, like, man, what would I tell either myself or my kids when they are that age? Because so much has changed in our culture. Our understanding of marriage, for that matter, has changed completely, if you will, right? So what kind of advice did you give to your sons?
Pray hard. No, I mean there's a bunch of layers to this conversation and this question that I think would be good for us to kind of talk about. There's the advice I gave to my sons. There's also kind of the whole dynamic of like, what age is it wise for guys to get married? We can talk about that. But I think in terms of the advice I gave to my sons, like I look at my marriage, and we've been married for almost 27 years, be 27 years this spring. And it's not always been easy. It's not always been strong, but I see that if we follow God's wisdom in scriptures for what God's vision is for marriage, then you do end up with all kinds of wins out of that. Like you end up building a life that lasts. You build a marriage that lasts. You end up building a friendship with someone that goes deeper than what you ever imagined possible. You end up creating dreams together that when you see them fulfilled is one of the most rewarding things that you can ever experience. So, I think that I've learned a lot in the 27 years, and a few things I tried to pass down to our boys when they got married. First of all, I would always say to them, you got to remember that your highest calling is to be one with your wife. That there is nobody else on this earth who is more important than your relationship with her. And you need to live in that space. So you are going with my blessing as a dad to say, you're starting your own family now. You have your first allegiance is not to mom and dad anymore. It is to your family, to your home, to what your needs are, and being one with her, and pursue that, like live in that space. We really talked a lot about that. I talked to them about just enjoy the adventure of it. Like it's never going to be everything you dreamed it was going to be. There's always going to be things that you go, man, this is wrong, or that could be better, or like it's just, but enjoy the adventure of it, because that's what it is. It's an adventure, and see it as that, right?
Yeah.
I really also try to challenge my sons in the sense of, you're starting your own home and your own family now. So just remember that you have to set the culture of loving Jesus in your family.
Yes.
I'll be honest, like I wasn't sure if my boys got that when I tried to explain that to them, until I watched my oldest son, Carter. I've watched a video from his wedding. And I didn't even know that this happened on his wedding day. They were, before their wedding happened, before the ceremony happened, they decided that my son and my now daughter-in-law, Kyla, they decided that they were going to meet outside of the church building around the corner from each other, but not see each other, not look at each other. Okay. And I didn't know any of this was going on. And then I see a video of their wedding video about a week after the wedding was done. And I see a picture of them holding hands on the other, around the wall from each other, so they can't see each other, but they're holding hands, and they were praying together before their wedding.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, that moment as a dad was one of the most significant highlights of my entire life, because I knew in that moment that he got it. Like he wanted their marriage, they wanted their marriage to start with them together surrendering themselves to God. And it was just amazing. So, I tried to encourage my boys in that environment. And then the last thing I'll say on this question in terms of advice I gave to my sons is they both went into their marriage with different fears.
Yeah.
And I just said to them, you know what, guys, no matter what fear you have, always remember that God has prepared you for this. Yeah. Like the Bible tells us that he has equipped us for every good work that he calls us to. And if being one with a woman is part of the good work that God's called us to as men. He's equipped you for. He's given you everything you need to be able to do this. And so just to try to speak into that fear before it had a chance to get a hold of their life. The last thing I'll say is I wrote each of my boys a journal that had in it, probably 50 to 75 different lessons I've learned about being a man.
Oh, wow.
And I hand wrote my notes on those things, taking passages of scripture. And that was, for me, my personal wedding gift to my sons.
Wow.
On the day they got married, was just to kind of hand down this journal to them.
Wow, that's great. And you know what, Kirk, I as I was again listening, and for me this is very good, because I have three little children, two boys and a girl, and you are absolutely right. I think creating and establishing this culture in the family is so important, because if you think, for the men that are listening and watching us right now, if you think that you're going to get to that day and give this kind of a device to your boys, expecting that they will understand, if you haven't done anything throughout their whole lives, you're just fooling ourselves, right? Yep. Like I had a very proud moment this week with my son, Thomas, because I was at home doing the dishes, cleaning the house and all that stuff. And my son comes to me, Daddy, why you're always cleaning and organizing and doing these things in the house? I said, Thomas, because this is what Jesus did for us. He left heaven. He came to serve us. And we men, we got to serve our wives. We got to serve our kids. That's what we do in the house. Yep. Right? And this is not about boasting, but to me, what I'm saying is there is an intention behind that on every day of life, to establish and create a culture that they will absorb more than they will hear. Right.
Absolutely.
And I think for me, like when I hear your story and to hear, the beautiful image that you describe about your son, that's what comes to my mind, that a lot of what they have learned, it was caught and not just heard. Right. And I think that it's a great reminder for all the men listening to this about being a godly husband. Is a lot of what you do, you are emulating, you are showing your kids what it is to be a godly husband for their sake and for the sake of their future and for the glory of God. So I think it's a great reminder. I really appreciate that, Kirk. Can
we talk about the culture thing about the age and getting married young?
Yes, I was gonna ask you that.
Okay, so. Here's my thing about getting married young. First of all, the average male in Canada now is getting married at the age, for the first time, at the age of 29 or 30 years old. Actually, it might even be a little bit older right now for the first time. Yeah. So I understand that from a whole bunch of practical reasons. I understand it from the perspective of, getting my career in order, getting my finances in order, the cost of living and owning a home, and all those kinds of things are really difficult, really hard to manage. But here's why I would make a case for guys getting married younger. There's a few reasons why. First of all, I think that we have to think practically. If you go back to Genesis and God's creation of marriage, we have this space that says, in God's mind, it wasn't good for the man to be alone, which included God had given to Adam a responsibility of doing work in the garden.
Yeah.
And so even the mandate of working, God said, it's not good for man to be alone. And I think when we teach young men that you should get your career established and then think about marriage, what we're saying to them is it's good for you to be independent and then tack a wife on at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Which is not the picture that God always had for marriage. God always had this picture of you're in this together. You're growing into this together. Now, Are you more mature at 30 than you are at 21? Yeah, probably. Hopefully, you hope you're more mature at 30 than you are at 21. But that's maturity was not part of what the biblical account was. It was about starting your family, doing life together with a woman, and being one together and growing together as a husband and wife. That God actually gives you this gift to sharpen each other as followers of Jesus in living out the Christian life. So that would be my first challenge is, like, how does our encouraging young men to wait until they've got their career lined up and life and finances settled? How does that line up with God's vision of being interdependent, not independent? And then, honestly, here's the other practical thing that I would just say. I don't know about you, but the average guy I know would have a hard time staying a virgin until he's 30 years old.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
So if we tell guys, wait until you're in your late 20s or early 30s to get married, is there any chance that we are actually
Setting them up for failure?
We're just setting them up for failure. Yeah. And maybe we've already kind of given up and just assumed they're just going to have sex anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so we live with that assumption and we go, well, if you're just going to have sex anyway, then just go ahead and get the rest of your life in order before you go and get married. Yeah. But what kind of message is that? Yeah. At the end of the day, like from a Christian worldview perspective, what kind of message is it to say that? Now, I know people who have waited till they were in their mid to late 20s or even 30s, and they were virgins when they got married. So I'm not saying it's impossible, that it can't happen. What I am saying is, realistically, for the vast majority, it's a real uphill battle physically to go that long without any type of sexual relations.
Yeah, and I think also, in addition to all you're saying, Kirk, like, for example, I think we as Christians, we have always been called to be countercultural, right? And if you think about all that you said, in a culture where hyper-individualism is so prevalent, right? When you tell the person, like, okay, you figured out your life, you figured out your career, you figured out your desires, your passions, your goal, and then you tack someone into that scheme, no wonder you're going to have more struggles in your marriage, right? Yeah. You're trying to kind of fit somebody into your life that is already on course, as opposed to, hey, let's build a course together, right? I like, for example, like when I'm really grateful for my wife, because when the Lord has called me to be involved in full-time ministry, she was a great supporter for me. And I can see today how much easier it was as a decision together, as we kind of embarked into this together, than if I were alone, right? Yeah. Just kind of making that kind of decision. So that's a great point. I think people should consider. Yeah.
I do think that there are a lot of guys who, I mean, people would look at a lot of young men in their 20s and go, like, he's just not ready. Like you look at his maturity levels, you look at, like, you're just sitting there going, he's not ready. But here's the thing. Here's what I would argue. You're right. He may not be ready in his early 20s, but that has more to do with the fact that we are actually accepting extended adolescence in boys. Right. It has more to do with the way that we're raising young men to become men. And so my challenge is that we need to stop accepting that it's okay for a 26-year-old to still act like he's 16.
That's right.
It's not okay. And we need to reach a point where we start helping men to be men, and helping to transition young men into fully being an adult man. And so I would just say that rather than shrugging our shoulders and going, well, you know, this is just the reality of the culture we live in, I would push back and say, no, to your point, Mauricio, we are always called to be countercultural. So like, if we don't help young men to become men right now, then there will come a day when we'll be accepting that it's okay for extended adolescence to go into its 30s.
Yep. Yeah. And all the ramifications that will come into the marriage after that.
Absolutely.
And I think this is the alert that I think we sometimes don't get it. I think it is a chain link kind of effect that I think we'll have to go back to the beginning and look at that.
Yeah. So I don't think that, like, I don't think every guy should have to get married when he's 21 or 22 or whatever. I wouldn't put an age on it. What I'm saying is, when God brings the right woman into your life, and you know this is the woman that you want to spend the rest of your life with, right? You just know this is the one. Then stop delaying, stop putting it off forever and ever, and step up and be a man and begin that next chapter. And whether that happens when you're 21 or whether that happens when you're 31 isn't the issue. The issue is about waiting for God to bring the right woman into your life and then acting on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Kirk, I think this is a great segue to something that I really wanted to kind of discuss with you and get your experience into this. For a lot of men, listening and watching this podcast, a lot of them, have been raised in church or been going to church for a long time. So, and they know that, every time you go to just your friend's wedding, they're going to preach on Ephesians 5:25 and, love your wife as Christ loved the church and all that. So, and I find sometimes, because I can look in my own life when I was a teenager, right? Like I knew that, but boy, how different it is right now at my age, and I am married for a certain amount of time, how it is to live that out every day in a practical way, right? So what are some of the things, Kirk, that you could, in a very practical way, tell the guys what it means to love your wife, like Ephesians talks about, like on a practical way, on an everyday life, because at the end of the day, that's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm just pulling up the passage of scripture in Ephesians 5. First of all, it is the passage that every man hates, right? Because seriously, like, I know a lot of times people get caught up in the conversation about wives submit to your husbands, but no guy likes the standard of love your wife like Jesus loves the church, because like we all know we can't live up to that standard. Yeah. So we already know we failed as guys, and none of us like failing. But I actually think Paul actually gives us a picture practically of what that actually looks like if you keep reading past the verse that says, love your wife like Christ loved the church. For instance, verse 29, and I'm reading out of the Christian Standard Bible, verse 29 says, no one ever hates his own flesh, but provides and cares for it, just as Christ does for the church, since we are members of his body. So all kinds of practical things in that. How do you provide for your wife? How do you provide for her emotional needs? How do you provide for her physical needs? How do you provide for her spiritually? What does it look like to provide for her? What does it look like to truly care for her? So practically, here's what that means. What is it that brings your wife life?
It's a good point.
What makes her feel loved by you? And do that. Like I can't tell you what it is because every woman is different.
Of course.
But learn, become a student of her and learn what it is that brings her life and what makes her feel like, man, my husband is on my side and he cherishes me and I am like, that she would say, my husband loves me more than any other person on the planet. Figure out what that is in the life of your wife. Do that. Keep doing that. Don't stop doing that. And because marriage is an adventure, that actually changes in some ways over time. And
Absolutely.
so what it was like when your kids were really little and, a newborn baby compared to, when you're an empty nester, it's a different dynamic in terms of what brings her life.
Absolutely.
But your role as a husband, practically, number one, what does it mean to love her like Christ loved the church? Figure out what's going to bring her life and make her feel loved, and do that.
Absolutely, Kirk. Kirk, just for us to wrap this conversation up, I have really enjoyed this conversation. I could stay here for at least 2 hours, another 2 hours chatting with you, but I don't know you want that to start with, or the people listening want that either. But I really appreciate that. So just for us to kind of wrap up this conversation, Kirk, let me continuing on this topic of being very practical here, right? I think sometimes a lot of men, especially young guys, given all the confusion in the culture, they don't even know what to look for. They don't even know what is the expectation, or what are the things that they should look for, right? So what are some of those traits, some of those qualities, some of those like 5 or 6 points that you can say, okay, man, this is what qualifies you as a godly husband. These are some of the things that that you can aim for, that you can strive towards, that you would encourage guys to kind of keep that as a as a goal, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Great question. Here are 5 or 6 things that I think are character traits of a godly husband. Number one, you are a prayer intercessor for your wife. You pray for her and with her, that she hears your heart, even if it's one sentence, one sentence prayer, that she hears your heart for her, and you're bringing her before God, that you recognize you're not God, that there is only one God, and you're bringing that God into your marriage relationship. That's the first thing. Second thing, second character trait I would say is you're a great lover, but not necessarily sexually. You're a great lover in terms of knowing those things that make your wife feel loved, and you've become an expert at doing those things. A third thing I would say is you prioritize her over everybody else in your life. So you recognize that she's the only one that you're called to be with forever, that everything else in your life is going to come and go. Your job's going to come and go. Your kids are going to grow up and leave home. Your friends are going to change over time. The one constant over your life is meant to be your marriage. So you prioritize her above everybody and everything else. You pursue her, keep finding ways to date her, keep finding ways to pursue her heart, to keep winning her heart. So you're a guy who keeps pursuing her. That you sacrifice for her, that you give up what you want for the sake of what she wants. The Bible talks about that the way of Jesus is considering others as being more important than yourself. And so apply that into your marriage, that you actually act like you believe your wife is more important than you, and you sacrifice your desires for her. And you persevere. That's the other thing. A godly husband perseveres. Marriage is not always easy. There will be difficult days, but a godly husband perseveres. He doesn't run away from the problems. It's hard work to grow close to somebody. You keep pressing in, you keep persevering through whatever the ups and downs are of your marriage, because she's the one that you're called to be with. She's your priority.
Yeah, Kirk, these are great things. I really, really appreciate you bring the practicality and the many years, of experience and what you have seen in men's lives, and you continue to as you pastor. Kirk, let me say thank you for being with us. We also planning other things with you for the future on this topic. So you guys listening or watching this, stay tuned, because we're going to bring you more of all of this wisdom and experience into this. Kirk, thank you so much again. I really appreciate it. I just want to remind the guys that we have a Godly Husband, a small group starting up this February 16th. So you are able to join. This is a small group. You can check on our website, impactus.org, and you will see all the resources related that can help you grow and become a godly husband, as we've been talking today. All right. Well, Kirk, thank you very much. God bless you. We'll be in touch. All right.
Thanks, Mauricio.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Impactus podcast. To learn more about living a life of purpose and godly impact, check out impactus.org.